So my name is Kleimann. I'm a researcher at the European University Institute.
And what have you been working on?
And I've been working on trade agreements, basically the depth and coverage of trade agreements and investment agreements, as well as the institutional dimension of trade agreements. As much as really another area of interest is the impact of the European Parliament on trade and investment policy making in the European Union.
And how do you perceive that impact?
So in fact, the European Parliament has created a sphere of transparency and deliberation, but in fact hasn't had much of an impact on trade policy making. If we look at the black letter law that comes out of the process at the end, we don't see very much influence of the Parliament, which might change in the future. But at the current level, there is not much impact. There's a lot of noise that is surrounding EU trade policy making at the moment, but we can't see tangible outcomes on behalf of the Parliament yet.
And why do you think that is?
Well, one of the reasons is that Parliament doesn't yet, or is still on a steep learning curve in terms of how to address actors that are, have well rehearsed relations like the Commission and the Council, and how to inject policy solutions that fit into a coherent set of proposed policies. This is something that Parliament is now getting better at, and they're having now better communication channels. They're getting more or better versed in the subject matter. It's very technical, but at the same time it needs to really communicate consistent policy amendments in a better fashion than just to threaten with a veto. So for that matter, there's still a lot of upward potential.
And tell me a bit about the book you've been writing.
So this book that we've been writing on ASEAN External Agreements is really a typology of the external agreements that ASEAN has now concluded within the last 20 years. It's been quite an active period of international treaty making for the organization as much as for the member states collectively, and for that matter, we found it worthwhile to have a first look at it, and we are in fact the first ones to do so.
And how did you become interested in these agreements?
Well, my particular area of interest and expertise is really the economic area. And ASEAN is, of course, as a regional entity, a very interesting actor, or a very interesting set of nation states. It's booming. This is one of the economic or the coming economic powerhouses in the world. It's rising. It's close to China and Japan, which are spreading production networks all over the region, and for that matter, it seemed very, very worthwhile to look at particularly the economic dimension of ASEAN as an external treaty maker.
And can these huge intercontinental and vastly complicated treaties ever be democratic?
Well, of course, no. They can. Of course, they can be democratic. Every country, of course, has its own domestic ratification procedures. And in some countries, we see a lack of democracy, and this is a domestic matter according to international law. It depends on what you look at. If you look at the United States and then the European Union, of course, you can criticize processes and transparency, etc. But at the same time, this compares to countries like, let's say, Singapore, which take a very authoritarian approach, and where the executive really is much more in the driving seat than it is with the domestic control procedures that we have here and see elsewhere.
So I've been talking to the professors here about the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, and that's been done between two, you'd say, very democratic power groups.
Right.
But it seems that there are so many special interests and compromises that this has been delayed again and again and again. So is democracy something that really slows these agreements down, in your opinion?
It makes these agreements sustainable. We need the input from civil society, and we need the input from businesses, first of all, to provide the information of what they want to see in those agreements, and what the contents of these agreements should be. We need interests to be reflected. For that matter, democracies and democratic institutions and control is very, very important. At the same time, of course, we have to balance democratic accountability and political participation with the effectiveness of negotiations, and we still need a certain amount of leeway for negotiators to actually conclude agreements and not open agreements again and again and again once they have already been negotiated. Transparency is very, very important, but effectiveness of negotiators is another value, and these two sometimes have to be balanced.
And going back to your own research, which is primarily economic, how tangible are the economic benefits of these trade agreements for ordinary citizens?
Right. Well, I think it is difficult to measure these things at a particular sort of point in time. There's much more in these agreements than just sort of the computed benefits that you can see. There's of course the economic dimension, and when we calculate the exact amounts, this sometimes doesn't look so sizable. Other studies come to the finding that it's more or less, with more or less employment will be created. It's a matter of econometric methodology, really. But these agreements also have a strategic value. And the strategic value is, for instance, in the importance of writing the rules of the global trading system in the 21st century. We are seeking to do this right now with the United States in the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Agreement. And this has a value in itself. At times of polycentric economic development, we need to create closer or better rules together with our closest partners. And we have an advantage of producing those rules ourselves rather than letting other regions produce these rules. And there's more than just the economic benefit.
And how would you define the particular insights of your own work to somebody interested in this topic?
Well, the book that we've been writing, ASEAN External Agreements, shows, gives us a very interesting story about 10 very, very diverse member states that are acting collectively to negotiate trade and investment agreements. And what we can see from that is that diversity among the negotiating member states often results in lower ambition and less coverage. So that tells us why certain individual ASEAN member states are in fact going out there and negotiating by themselves, and third countries are approaching individual ASEAN member states rather than the ASEAN collective, which is in fact exactly the case of what the European Union has done. They've approached ASEAN first as a collective, and then they withdraw and say we want to negotiate one by one because we can get more out of it. And this tells us an important story about what regional integration will be like in the coming years. If we look at the Transpacific Partnership Agreement, a lot of people are talking about this as being like the 21st century trade agreement, whereas there's a lot of stumbling blocks in there because, again, we have highly diverse parties to this agreement, and they might not actually achieve the ambition that was put forward or that was suggested by the United States in the beginning when they started this initiative. So diversity, as in the Doha round of WTO negotiations, of member states results in lower ambition of the outcome. For that matter, we see a lot of regional integration initiatives between countries that have more similarities in institutional development and economic development. And this gives us a sense of what we can expect from these agreements that are being negotiated right now in the future.
And tell me about your own ambitions. What kind of impact do you hope to make when you set out to write a book like this?
Right. So what we particularly in the area of economics, I think what we wanted to tell is a story about ASEAN as a treaty maker of economic agreements, and how potent is ASEAN really as a treaty maker in that area. And what can it achieve in other regional integration initiatives such as RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Trade Agreement with ASEAN plus 6, and how will our individual ASEAN member states fare in integration initiatives such as the TPP? What role will ASEAN member states and ASEAN as a collective play in this big game of trade and investment negotiations that is currently underway? And our finding in this particular instance is that ASEAN has a rather limited role, and what we can expect from RCEP as well is rather limited. And ASEAN member states, in fact, could be better off going alone. At the same time, what we suggest in the book is that there are ways of reconciling individual ASEAN member states agreements with the ASEAN Economic Community as much as the ASEAN plurilateral agreements.
Excellent. Thank you very much.